From ABC News, World News Sunday, here's Sam Donaldson.
Good evening. A disagreement within the NATO military alliance that Washington fears could play into Soviet hands appeared to harden today, as NATO's two top European leaders, Britain's Margaret Thatcher and West Germany's Helmut Kohl, clashed in a face-to-face meeting over the issue. The issue is the modernization of NATO's short-range nuclear missiles. And as Jerry King reports, the stakes could be high.
Margaret Thatcher came here to argue the American position that NATO must modernize its short-range nuclear Lance missiles.
We are all signed up and pledged on that, and no two nations can alter it.
Helmut Kohl was just as adamant. NATO must first explore the possibility of including the Lances in arms reduction talks with the Warsaw Pact. Virtually all of NATO's short-range nuclear missiles are based here. It makes this country a target. The prospect of modernizing such nuclear weaponry makes people here nervous.
This country is a total battlefield, in any case, if a war happens. And it will be no more here. So it should be understood in the United States that people are thinking twice if there's talk about new weapons.
The West Germans prefer the Gorbachev message of coexistence, of arms control. In effect, how to deal with the Soviet Union is the core of the disagreement. Helmut Kohl is in a bind, his popularity sagging, elections coming next year. There was no indication from Thatcher today. She was ready to understand. The setting was a hotel called locally the Hotel Romantic, but this was no Anglo-German love-in. They were intense and frank discussions, said Kohl. Diplomatese for, they argued, said Thatcher.
The Soviet Union has updated 95% of her short-range nuclear weapons. Our very much smaller number dates from 1972.
While they each explained their position, it was clear that on the subject of the nuclear missiles, it was a dialogue of the deaf. No minds were changed, and the impasse will continue to be an impediment at next month's 40th anniversary NATO summit that the heads of state, including President Bush, will have to try to resolve. Jerry King, ABC News, Deidesheim, West Germany.
While Mrs. Thatcher and Kohl were arguing about NATO's nuclear forces, the U.S. Navy said it will retire 3 short-range nuclear weapons by 1991. The Ashrock nuclear depth charge, the Subrock missile, and the Terrier missile, for a total of 1,100 warheads. That's about 5% of the total U.S. stockpile. The weapons originally were intended to deter attacks on the Navy's surface ships, but are no longer needed. Alaskan authorities complained today about the impasse they see in the effort to clean up last month's big oil spill from the tanker Exxon Valdez. And they placed the blame for the alleged lack of effective action squarely on Exxon's shoulders. Details from Chris Bury.
The techniques that Exxon is using to clean up the beaches, washing rocks by hand or spraying them with pressurized hot and cold water, are not working, according to Alaska officials.
The oil there is very thick, and the cold water, even at higher pressure, just isn't getting the oil up.
Today, the state suggested Exxon consider more radical methods, including bulldozers and burning.
They've got to get more aggressive before they're going to be able to get the job done.
I think the methods we're employing are working, and I think we will continue to improve and refine those methods as we're doing every day.
The cleanup forces assembled here now resemble a military invasion, from helicopters to Navy troop ships and snappy salutes for admirals. But on the beaches where oil is saturated up to a foot thick, even workers paid almost $17 an hour by Exxon say progress is painfully slow.
It's just a useless work, you know.
Each day, the tide returns more oil and the work starts over.
It's real hard, because when the tide comes in, it all comes back again.
And while Exxon and Alaska officials remain at odds about the progress of the cleanup here, another battle is underway in the lower 48. In the Northeast, a one-day boycott of Exxon products has been called by state legislators and environmental groups for Tuesday to protest Exxon's handling of the spill. In full-page newspaper ads, Exxon is telling consumers such a boycott would only hurt small independent dealers who are not to blame. In claiming full responsibility for the spill, Exxon has promised to scrub 305 miles of oiled coastline by September. So far, according to the state, less than a mile of beach has actually been cleaned. Chris Bury, ABC News, Valdez, Alaska.
The last two astronauts who were supposed to take off with the space shuttle Atlantis on Friday left Kennedy Space Center today and flew home to Houston. Ron Graby and Dave Walker will visit their families and await word on a new launch date for the mission. Meanwhile, NASA engineers began replacing two faulty fuel system parts that forced cancellation of the launch just seconds before liftoff. NASA says the Atlantis could be ready to try again by next Friday.
World News Sunday, brought to you by United Airlines.